What's going on YouTube? This is Rybo at the bench, and today I have a cut or carry knife review today looking at this Hinderer XM-18. This is the non-flipper version, and I've been really excited to take a look at this. This was also loaned into the channel recently, so thank you for that, Jordan. You can see I already have an issue with the thumb stud there. That'll come back, but this is a really cool opportunity to take a look at this because I am not a tactical knife guy. I have never really understood Hinderer. I have never really gotten into it. I went through a brief Emerson phase a few years ago, but never really been my kind of thing. However, I've always been interested to see what the fuss is about and to see, if it justifies the price, if it's something I would enjoy without, risking the $300 to $400, to try one out. So really awesome opportunity to get one in and check it out. And so, full disclaimer, this video is going to be very similar to the Sabenza video that I did recently, where I'm going to say, this is not my wheelhouse. This is not where I am comfortable. So I am not even knowledgeable about the budget line, where I tend to be between like 20 and 100, 150 bucks. I am not a very smart man in that category, so I am really not a smart man in this category. But what I can do is I can tell you, for somebody who's not a tactical knife guy, who's somebody who's used to something, knives that are a little bit lighter weight, a little bit more EDCable, I can tell you my impressions of this. I can tell you what I think after carrying it and maybe get kind of an outsider perspective. That's really all I can do. I'm not a Hinderer fan. I don't know a ton about them, and so I may miss some details. Feel free to comment if that is the case, and I'm sure it is. But just a disclaimer: this is not a video if you are a Hinderer guy. Like you're gonna hate me for this because I don't know enough about this line of knives. Okay, so let's do some size checks and then size comparison, and we'll get into it. So this is a larger knife, 3.24 inches in sharpened blade length-ish. Closed in the pocket, a fairly large knife at 4.8, almost 5 inches in the pocket. And then the thickness on this, you're looking at 0.53, so right under that half-inch benchmark that I always shoot for, but that's okay because this is a larger knife. You have some G10 scales on this side and then titanium with an M390 blade. This is a frame lock, obviously, and thumb stud. This, most XM-18s, from what I understand and what I've seen, are flippers, but this is one of the more rare non-flipper versions. And so, yeah. All right, quick weight checks. This is not a lightweight knife by any means. But that's okay because it kind of fits to the tactical, kind of heavy duty thing. So 5.7 ounces, fairly heavy, but it fits with almost a 5-inch knife in the pocket. And let's do some size checks. Let me see what I have available. So let's do probably the closest knife I have to anything like this, which is the Cold Steel Code 4. Let's do the Spyderco Shaman, not sure about that. That's probably good. So you get an idea. This is a larger knife for sure. Larger knife, but smaller blade than you may expect. Yeah. All right, so things that I like about this knife. Honestly, a lot of things. I was very surprised at this knife. It really never has appealed to me. It's, I tend to be more of the kind of get me the lightest knife that I can actually accomplish things with, the one that disappears in the pocket. And this pretty much flies in the face of all of that. This is a big, bulky, heavy duty knife. I'm typically not a frame lock guy. I typically don't like when you have one side of G10 and the other side that's just metal. But this kind of broke all of that, right? So rules are made to be broken. This is an exception to that, and I've actually enjoyed this quite a bit. First of all, ergonomics. From what I understand, this is kind of Hinderer's calling card, but the ergonomics on this knife are absolutely spectacular. Not only with your hand up here on the finger choil, but also back here. It feels really natural and really good. When I first pulled this out of the pocket, my first impression was this is a big knife. Then I opened it up, And I was like, oh, I get Hinderer now. I understand. As soon as I put this in the hand, I was like, I understand at least some of what people love about Hinderers. They feel amazing. This is a big knife, bulky knife, but I feel very, very comfortable. It is quite literally, I mean, not quite literally. I hate when people misuse literally. It is very much so a practical, an enjoyable knife to use. This is a joy to hold and a joy to cut with because of those ergonomics. And so immediately, my impressions of Hinderer changed just based off of the ergonomics. I don't find it uncomfortable that you have G10 and metal. The clip just disappears to me. I don't really feel it at all. There are no hot spots on this knife. And you add things like the jimping up here, which I think is incredible jimping. There's something about this that is really good. The fact that it's carried from the top up here onto the blade, that all of that just works really, really well together. You have some back here and you have some on the lock bar. It is really, really nice. It locks up very solidly in the hand. And I may be gushing a little bit, but the ergos are just so freaking good on this knife. I really, really like that, and that's almost cause enough alone to really like this knife. The G10 I think is very good. It's very unique in terms of the pattern. You don't really see this on a lot of other knives, but it's grippy while not being uncomfortable. It's really exactly what I look for in G10, something that's going to let me lock in. It's not going to hurt my hand, but it's going to look nice. It's going to feel nice. It's going to really lock in. It's got a good amount of aggressiveness to it, and so the G10 is done very, very well. You have that nice little scalloping right there, which just adds to the ergos. And all in all, it just feels really, really good in the hand. Other things that I like about the knife, so maybe the most surprising thing to me was the lock bar. So a lot of times I struggle with lock bars. I've kind of disparaged them a little bit in the past, and that's pretty unfair. But this lock bar is really incredible. So you have the relief on the outside, which I think actually looks pretty nice on this knife. But what's so amazing about this lock bar is it is incredibly easy to disengage. And I say that and I just messed it up because I wasn't locked in. But it is very, very smooth. I don't notice any lock stick at all on this knife. And it is just super, super smooth. It's something about the tension on this bar, but it almost feels flimsy, although it's not. And you do have a over travel stop down here. But it is incredibly easy to disengage. I've heard in the new, I believe, 6th generation XM-18s, they actually do a lock bar insert, but I've actually heard that can give you lock stick more than take it away. I don't see a reason for it. I haven't noticed any issues at all disengaging this. It's honestly one of the unexpected joys of the knife to me. One of those things, it's like, it's a very, very small detail, but it's something that you do every time you're touching the knife. Every time you touch the knife, you're going to be disengaging this lock bar, and it's so easy to do, and it's really a joy. And it's just a weird thing to say, positive about the knife, but it's been really great. Plus, you have that jimping there, which really lets you lock in on it. So I don't have any issues with that, which is often my issue with frame and liner locks. Other things that I like, the pocket clip, while I don't necessarily love the looks of it, it is a pocket clip, and it's great. I mean, it works just fine. I don't think you really need a deep carry clip or anything like that on a massive knife like this, but the pocket clip works very well. I think it's well positioned. It has this, it comes down very nicely on here. All in all, it holds the knife very well. Obviously, the right choice is to carry tip up. That is really the only choice, in my opinion. So right side tip up for me works very well because, obviously the clip is going to be on this side. This is not a knife that you could switch the clip over because you have the G10 on this side, and that would be just uncomfortable for everybody. So you really have to carry the knife this way, and I think that that's the right way to carry it anyway. I mentioned the jimping already. The pivot, this is not the tri-way pivot, and I'm going to struggle with that on camera again. This is not the tri-way pivot, but the action on this knife is very nice. Now, I believe that this came on Teflon and was upgraded to bronze washers, but it is very smooth. It reminds me of my Spidey Chef in a lot of ways. Just very dependable, not gritty at all, very, very smooth. The action when you get it is very fast and deploys very well, and all in all, just feels really, really good. Just very smooth, exactly what you expect from nice bronze washers. Build quality overall, I think, is very high on this knife. It is an overbuilt kind of tank of a knife, but there are just details here. I love the relief cuts here. I think that this is pretty cool right there. There are just a lot of things to really, really like about this knife. The fact that you have, that you can remove these very easily without having to key them on the other side. The lock bar relief right here, which I think is done very well. All in all, just like the details on this knife, once you start carrying it, are really, really nice and, you know, kind of unexpected for more of a heavy-duty tactical knife. Obviously, the logo is pretty sweet. Who doesn't like that? But yeah, just the details, the build quality on this knife, it feels like an expensive knife. That's definitely something you want when you're spending $300–400 on a knife. In some ways, I like the fact that this is a non-flipper because, you know, it does fit a lot better in the pocket for the size. I also like, you know, usually when there's a flipper, you have something that comes really far down here. I'm not really forced back too much, and maybe it wouldn't really impact me here. I'd have to get one in the hands to see. But overall, I think it's a good choice, at least in terms of the ergonomics and kind of how it holds in the pocket. And we'll talk a little bit more about the thumb stud in just a second, but I do like that in some ways. And then finally, M390, right? So, you know, I'm not a steel guy. I don't know a ton about different steels. I know all about M390. I don't know a ton in practice. I don't have too much experience with it, but it's a great steel. And, you know, definitely one of those things that you expect to find on a knife of this price. All right, so that kind of does it for things that I like about the XM-18 non-flipper. Now let's talk about the dislikes of this knife. And there are a couple. So number one, I've been talking about that thumb stud and kind of alluding to the fact that that's going to come back up. The thumb stud action is really good in itself, but this knife suffers fairly dramatically from the same issue that a lot of frame lock thumb stud knives suffer from, which is I am pushing right up against that frame when I'm trying to deploy this knife, and I end up just fighting myself. So if you're not a knife guy, if you're fairly new to the hobby, essentially what's happening here is you have a detent ball on this frame right there. You can see that right there. And then you have a hole to accept that ball on the blade. And so you have something like this seated in something like this. And the problem is when you are holding the knife like this to deploy, I'm using this finger to really push down and get a good lockup so that I can at the same time push with my finger up and out on the thumb stud. Now, if you have a liner lock knife, you have a piece of liner right here that's protecting you from pushing directly onto the frame or onto the lock bar. But if you don't have that, then what you're doing is you're pushing directly and you're forcing that ball further and further into the hole at the same time that you're pushing on the blade to get up and out of that hole on the thumb stud. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if it does, but the problem is you end up getting in this just you're pushing, and I'm applying pressure here, I'm applying pressure here, and I don't really mean to do it here, but that's kind of where I have to bear down on the knife, and it's just very hard to deploy. Now, there is a way around this. You can kind of back your fingers up and well, if I can do it on camera. So, I mean, you can definitely deploy the knife, but it's something you have to think about each and every time you come back to it. And that really sucks. I have the same issue with this QSP Songbird over here, which is even worse because it's a smaller knife and a smaller, you know, area to kind of get your hand on, but it has the same exact issue. This knife really has it bad, you know, it's just one of those things that sometimes I go and I'm like, why won't it deploy? Oh yeah, it's because my finger, and I have to kind of back it up and you know, figure it out. So in that sense, I may prefer a flipper because it really takes away that variable, and it's something I don't really have to think about. So that's been kind of one annoyance of this knife. The weight, obviously, this is a bigger knife, so 5.5 ounces or so. That's going to notice, I mean, you're going to notice that in the pocket. Now, you are making that decision. I mean, this is a tactical big knife. So if you're picking this guy out and this is going to be your EDC for the day, you're making that choice. And I have actually enjoyed having it in the pocket. It hasn't really been an issue. But this is a big knife. This is definitely something that you're going to notice. And so that's something to kind of be aware of. And then finally, the blade. So I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm in and out on this blade. I see it for a tactical knife, but I'm not a tactical user. So The blade stock is really thick. This is what they call the spanto or sponto blade, where it's kind of this spear point tanto-ish thing. But you have a really thick blade, especially here where you have that traditional kind of tanto part. This is this weird hybrid. But you have a very, very thick blade stock, not necessarily like a super slicey knife necessarily, but overall, like I'm not a tanto guy. I don't typically buy knives like that. I am not really a tactical guy, so like my knife, my preferred knife shape is something really thin and slicey like this. So for the type of knife that it is, and if I put my tactical hat on a little bit, this is fine. It's totally cool. But I would probably get one of the thinner ground blades, maybe in a different profile than this, if I were to buy a Hinderer. So that's something that's just going to be, kind of each man to himself, man or a woman to himself. But the blade style is not necessarily my cup of tea. All right, so final conclusions on the XM-18 non-flipper. I like this knife. I like it a lot. I would say that the XM-18 in general, the lineup, it would be a carry for me. I don't know if I'll ever own one. I would love to try a flipper version, but the knife has a lot going for it. Before, Hinderer was not on my list. After trying this knife, Hinderer is definitely on my list, and specifically the XM-18. There are a couple things about this one that I may not ever purchase this configuration, but in general, the XM-18, after trying this, I could definitely see one of these in my collection. I get Hinderer now. I understand the craze. I can appreciate them a little bit more. It's just a little bit different use than what I'm typically going for. But all in all, super excited to try this out. I would say XM-18 is a carry overall. This specific configuration may not be what I have, but overall, I like the lineup very well. All right, so hope you've enjoyed these ramblings of someone who knows nothing about Hinderer XM-18s or tactical folders. But if you've stuck around this long, I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.